Thank you very much. Before I start, I would just like to acknowledge the Gonigal people of the Eora Nation, the traditional custodians of this land, and pay my personal respects to their elders, past, present, and future. So I'm Vix Cross, a partner at the world's largest sustainability consulting firm, ERM. I recently transferred to Melbourne, and I'm proud to be advising many mining and critical resources clients across the full life cycle of their mining activities, from initial exploration and feasibility through to financing and development and site closure. I lead our global sustainability reporting and disclosure service line. I have the pleasure of advising many organizations through this alphabet soup we were just hearing about from the previous speaker. I work with mid-tier miners and critical resources suppliers right through to some of the largest manufacturing companies in the world, helping them to navigate these disclosures and hopefully find some commercial advantage hidden in amongst all of that red tape. I'm really passionate about helping organizations use environmental, social governance topics to their advantage, as well as to the advantage of all of the stakeholders that rely so heavily on their organizations. And I really want to try and inspire you to do the same today, to find some commercial advantage in amongst all of the red tape that is swirling around our ESG discipline at the moment. The mining sector in its own right is fairly mature on different aspects of environment and social governance. And here it's about how we can really use what's changing in the landscape around us in the mandatory frameworks to our advantage. As we heard from the previous speaker, ESG is no longer a nice to have, with jurisdictions globally adopting new mandatory reporting frameworks. This is the latest map that we keep having to update quite a lot as jurisdictions around the world are adopting new mandatory frameworks. Countries like Canada and Australia have recently announced new frameworks that were helping our clients really break new ground and report against. And we're seeing a wave start to move across APAC now. We've got several countries such as Hong Kong now introducing mandatory disclosures. And we're no longer, it's just the purview of companies in Europe under the CSRD. But at the heart of this evolving disclosure landscape are really just two critical frameworks. And if you can get your heads around these two, the rest of the pieces will soon start to fall into place. They're both underwritten by accountants in some ways. The first is the International Financial Reporting Standard, or IFRS, which has written the ISSB framework. And at its heart is the financial materiality of ESG topics. So giving transparent information to investors about the potential risks and opportunities surrounding your organization. On the other side is EFRAG, which is the European organization, the equivalent organization, the European Financial Reporting Advisory Group, who are working to put sustainability across all aspects on the same level as financial reporting, introducing new mandatory reporting disclosures, which each jurisdiction in the EU is adopting in its own way. Wading through all of this can literally feel like you're trying to boil the ocean. We've had clients talk to us about people in their organizations saying that their ears are hurting whenever they talk to them about these disclosures. It is a lot of work. There is, of course, a cost of non-compliance. Some of the jurisdictions in the EU are looking at fines of up to 5% of turnover. But also the cost of compliance is extremely high in consultants' time, in auditors, in all the internal resources that you need to organize your data, which probably already exists in the organization, but in a way that's going to give you that compliant disclosure, and a disclosure that will be subject to limited assurance at the end of the process. So that organizations are really feeling that pressure. And those organizations in particular, and we're seeing this quite a lot in the market here at the moment, that might maybe have an immature sustainability strategy, are struggling to catch up and not only establish a sustainability strategy for the future, but also meet the requirements of these disclosure regulations as they kick in. So companies are having to decide right now how they're going to tackle this. And we're talking a lot to organizations about really understanding their appetite, and this is very personal for different organizations. We've got companies in some instances that just want to get their chin a little bit above the bar and do enough to get by in the first year. We've got other organizations that really want to see this opportunity and create value from it. And neither is right or wrong, but it's about knowing what that appetite really is in your own organization and making sure that all of your internal functions are aligned around that. And there are different factors to consider in this. The first might be the viewpoint of your investors or your customers' investors, perhaps, who might be under these mandatory disclosures before you do, depending on your own jurisdiction. And at a very basic level, of course, investors are already looking for the Equator principles to be satisfied, for your projects being able to prove that you have free, prior and informed consent for development from indigenous communities. But they're also now expecting you to understand your physical climate risks. How might your access roads, for example, be impacted by changing climatic considerations in the future? And building this into your investment case being a really key part of that investor ESG dialogue now. In fact, we know that 72% of European institutional investors are already willing to pay a premium for enhanced ESG credentials. And we expect it not to be very long before they're rejecting other projects that don't have those same criteria being met. On the strategic advantage side of things, this is really about access to customer markets. So how can having richer data, ESG data, add to the customer conversation that you're able to have? It might be that you're supplying your materials into China, perhaps, before they reach Europe or another country affected by these jurisdictions. But we're certainly seeing an increasing trend of requests for more ESG information coming through those customer conversations. And that's before you get on to advantages of ESG that we were hearing about from the last speaker, such as operational improvements, different conversations with your supply chain, perhaps on procurement factors for ESG. And then, of course, there's the risk management side of things, really understanding what risks are endemic around the business is absolutely core to the mining sector. This is not new for any of the people at the conference today. But actually thinking through the additional lens of what could those impacts be on society as well as on your own project is what the new regulations are demanding. So it's not only about the impact of bushfires or access to drinking water on your own project, but how might those also impact the communities in which you're all operating. And finally, that piece around access to capital. We're already seeing organizations enjoying a lower cost of debt finance by meeting ESG criteria. And in Europe, again, the banking authorities are demanding that all of the European commercial banks are obliged to rate their ESG performance of the clients that they're lending money to. Often this is done behind the scenes, just scraping information from public ESG disclosures. But as soon as we get a lot more data in the market, you can imagine that there's going to be a lot more scrutiny as to what good looks like. So how can we turn this process around? Well, the CSRD mandates this process called double materiality, which is all about the organization considering both the financial materiality, so how sustainability issues might impact your organization's ability to perform. And it also demands that impact materiality is considered, so how those business activities might affect society and the environment. This is about really understanding those wider impacts, not just within your own organization, but right back up the value chain. So historic frameworks like GRI would look at impact materiality, but it would stop where you define the scope. Whereas now, under the CSRD, you have to take that whole value chain look. So some of the major manufacturing organizations that we're working with are now for the first time going right back into their value chain, not just as far as the mines and the resources that they're using, but to the equipment manufacturers and all the other people involved in that value chain to collect this new level of ESG data. The concept of double materiality looks all the way up the value chain at impact materiality, combines that with financial materiality, and helps an organization conclude a picture of what needs to be tackled first in terms of sustainability. Now, the good news for some of this is that the CSRD and the ISSB both have a phase-in period. So as tempting as it can be to try and boil the ocean all at once and prepare lots of new data points across your whole value chain, actually, the wise companies are biting this off a piece at a time, or making one well-brewed cup of tea rather than trying to boil the ocean. And actually, there's an art to that as well as a science in really, as you're conducting the double materiality process, understanding those different stakeholder voices and deciding strategically what to tackle first. So in order to really get the most out of the regulations, every organization needs a disclosure strategy. And if value creation is your ultimate goal from sustainability regulations, it's about being really discerning about which new data points you might choose to connect, which others you may explain to customers or others in your value chain that you're not going to do right now and that they're going to have to wait. And that can be a difficult conversation to have if you haven't got a clear disclosure strategy as an organization. So some questions to ask yourselves when discerning how to prioritize which actions for regulation. How will this, of course, help drive my compliance? Will satisfying this data requirement help me maybe answer more than one or half a dozen data points at once? But more importantly, will a new piece of data around this help me gather a commercial insight that I might not have had previously? Will it enable a different level of conversation in the organization and give me an insight that I can act upon? Does it help me better understand and manage my risks? Is it possible to integrate what we're doing on the disclosure side of things into the enterprise risk management framework that exists for the organization? In the disclosure, you need to be able to join up those sinews and make a very clear case for how these risks are being mitigated and tackled. Or even better if it's actually helping you as an organization to manage a risk in a more joined up and systematic way. Does it potentially help drive a positive external impact? A really important point that we were just hearing out from the previous speaker in terms of the mind that we all want to see. Does this, by tackling a particular ESG topic that's also going to help with my disclosure, is it advancing a journey of positive impact that the organization is committed to going on anyway? Does it also help mitigate an external impact that is one the organization and its stakeholders have deemed as material? And of course, very fundamentally, is this something that our investors care about? Is it something our funders are going to be asking us about in the future? And how do we make sure we embrace that topic head on rather than wait for the difficult question at the AGM? So my key takeaways from today for you. First of all, whatever your appetite, whether it's chin above the bar or whether it's value creation, make sure you've had that conversation. You've got internal stakeholders aligned on that appetite level. Use the 3-year phase-in for these mandatory disclosures really wisely and systematically bite off the things that you want to chew in the right order. Please don't try and boil the ocean. When it comes to the double materiality analysis, use that process well. Listen to those silent voices in your organization and your other stakeholders to understand how you might better integrate environment, social, governance topics into your organization and your enterprise risk management structure. Engage your legal and finance teams early. Make sure that they understand how you're going to explain your disclosure strategy to your auditors and make sure the auditors are clear on that. And if it's your customers that are asking you for information before your organization's ready, make sure you're ready to defend why you won't be sharing certain amounts of ESG data with them and let them know when they will have that so they can include that in their own report or explain part of their disclosure. Finally, own your own agenda here. As I said, don't let the tail wag the dog. You don't need to. There's an awful lot of work to be done in ESG across all topics. But by aligning it with your own corporate purpose, understanding what data you already have and that you can build upon, make sure that you're only deriving insights that you can really act on. There was a quote from New York Climate Week a few weeks ago about every dollar spent on reporting was a dollar that couldn't be spent on action. which is a hypothesis I completely disagree with. I think every dollar spent on reporting should be a dollar that advances your sustainability journey. And I challenge you all to think about that as you're planning your own disclosures on ESG in the coming weeks and months. And finally, ERM is proud to be thought leading on all of these topics regularly. We have webinars that you can listen to. We've got a new podcast series on ASRS coming out very shortly. So if you'd like any more information, please do read any of our insight pieces, many of which are tailored for the mining sector, and do contact us and reach out on LinkedIn if you'd like to join the ERM community. Thank you very much.